Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I read a book a number of years ago. It's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. If you're not familiar, Annie Duke is a professional poker player, and don't sleep on Annie Duke. She is super smart. I think all those poker players are really super smart. But anyhow, in the beginning of the book, she talks about the section is called lost my page here. I'm sorry. The little section is called Pete Carroll and the Monday Morning Quarterbacks. And it talks in here about Super Bowl 49, which was in 2015. And I'll just read a little bit from the book. The Seattle Seahawks, with 26 seconds remaining and trailing by 4 points, had the ball on second down at New England's 1-yard line. Everybody expected Seahawks coach Pete Carroll to call for a handoff to running back Marshawn Lynch. Why wouldn't you expect that call? It was a short yardage situation, and Lynch was one of the best running backs in the NFL. End quote. What did Pete Carroll do? He had Russell Wilson quickly drop back and threw a pass. And it was intercepted by the Patriots, losing the game. And Pete Carroll got eviscerated in all the media publications because, that was stupid, that was stupid, that was stupid. And Annie Duke in the book goes on to call that resulting, is that we measure, we determine whether something's smart or not depending upon the results. But if you talk to the experts, you talk to the football experts, other coaches, they said that was the right thing. That was the right call for Pete Carroll in that situation, just based on all the odds. And the point I'm trying to make with respect to this is that a lot of times we have conventional wisdom. It's kind of, it's short yardage, run the ball. We kind of get stuck in this thinking that, hey, this seems to be the safe thing. But if we step back, maybe there is some other alternative. That leads me into another book that I have. I've interviewed Dr. Wayne Baker on here. He's got a book, All You Have to Do Is Ask. And it's a great book. And I'm not questioning him at all because he's got 20 years of experimentation and real world experience with his reciprocity rings and getting people to ask for the things they need. And I won't get into it. It's a good book, and listen to the episode I did with him. But the conventional wisdom of people out there is ask. And sometimes conventional wisdom is not always the best course. And that led me to an introduction to Chris Tuff, who wrote the book Save Your Asks. And I have Chris on here today. He's a best-selling author and highly sought-after keynote speaker who's presented to Nike, Meta, Delta, Verizon, Harvard. And his original book, which has sold over 100,000 copies, The Millennial Whisperer, is a USA Today bestseller. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I didn't have to ask him to be on. I was introduced. I think this is awesome. Chris, welcome to the program.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess give us a quick rundown. You did agency work, and then you decided to write this millennial book, and just things started to change all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, what always looks like a blip on the radar in reality is it seems really long in the moment, right? And so, I mean, my background is I kind of fell into the burgeoning world of social media right as it was being invented. And my first claim to fame was really working directly with Mark Zuckerberg as he was expanding from colleges to the general public to actually make this a tool where it's not just to meet a girl, it's actually to make us more connected. And I've always been obsessed with human behavior and connection. And that's essentially what I spent the next really 15, 20 years doubling down on. And it wasn't until I hit my rock bottom that things really began to change. And my rock bottom was I wasn't living the authentic life that I desired, and my passions had evolved. I wasn't that excited about social media and what it had become. And I really wanted to put my efforts into making a difference in the world and doubling down on my 2 daughters and my wife. And so I made some big changes. And it was actually it seemed like a really long 7 months, but it was actually 7 months after that I introduced to me on myself as on this executive retreat. And I was like, guys, I don't know you, and I don't really know what I do in my job anymore. I have 400 employees, but I'm kind of like the millennial whisperer. And these guys kind of perk up. And after I did my kind of, my speech about my history and some of the things I struggled with and what I was overcoming, they're like, so Chris, what do you do with these guys? Because man, I can't get a handle on them. They're coming in late. They're asking for promotions. I gave them some of my tactics, which is really rooted in genuine connection, right? Take a vested interest in their lives and everything will begin to change. And it was one of the guys leading the retreat, a guy by the name of Tommy Breedlove. He was like, you gotta write that book. So I wrote it I did it in a sprint. My sister helped me edit it. And then it kind of started to take off. And it wasn't until, I was on the big stage at Nike and it actually sold books, which as an author is a pretty difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit. And, when the pandemic hit anyone, it's a time of reflection. And I didn't know how long it was going to last, but I asked myself in that moment, what's the book that I was really born to write? And I had then dipped into a speech that I would do every year at Vanderbilt for the senior class. And it was nothing to do with marketing or social media. It was how to network like a mofo. I was like, what if I took that and I made the title of the book a call to action? Because a lot of people aren't saving their asks, and I'll call it Save Your Asks. And it's all going to be about how to better network and sell by saving our asks and going in with the desired outcome of any interaction to just be genuine connection. And then out of that, business will roll out. And, that's also, I'm on the receiving end, as are you, Frank, and probably a lot of listeners of people going in for the ask way too early, right? Yeah. Or, it happens on LinkedIn. Hey, I see you're connected to Frank. Can you introduce me? I'm like, I'm not going to waste my one ask I have with Frank, and I haven't talked to you in 4 years. Why would I do that, right? And so the whole idea is to get us thinking a little bit differently. And what I found is with the execution, the implementation of some of these tactics, it makes sales and networking a lot more fulfilling again. And I think we've lost the art of that. So yeah, that's kind of the gist.
Well, as you were talking about the millennial book, the millennial whisperer, I feel like, well, let me just say this. We're humans, and that's not changing anytime soon, right? We like to think it has, LinkedIn's changing everything. No, we're still humans. And my point is that you could take that book 20 years from now and whatever the new generation is that the millennials are having problems with, just change the damn title.
Exactly.
It's be the same, because it's all really about caring one another.
That's exactly right. Leading with empathy first. And, it's not that different, the philosophy of the millennial whisperer, which is just take a genuine interest in your people, ask them how they're doing, right? And I say it's no different than how we network and sell. And I just did a blog post about the most important question we can ask anyone. And I truly do believe the most important question we can ask anyone is, what's your dream, right? Whether that be our employees or the person you're sitting next to on that flight that might be delayed. Like when you can get there and someone feels vulnerable enough to share that, and then you do one thing to help them achieve that. And that, to me, that's what gives me the most energy. When I can help unlock people's dreams by doing one thing. A lot of times it's helping them, I'll uncover that they want to write a book. I'm like, here's my nonfiction book planner. Let me know how I can help, right? Yeah. Like I get goosebumps talking about it because I feel like so many people have either given up on their dreams way too early in life, or they feel like it's just too impossible to achieve. And, I bring this together in this blog post talking about this amazing moment. I was in Turks and Caicos. I'll tell a quick story here. And when I feel the energy, I go there. I just published Save Your Asks, and we were in this deserted kind of, when you go to the restaurants and you almost feel bad for the wait staff and you're like, we're the only ones here. They have a tuxedo on, right? It was one of those moments. And this guy, he had a very strong accent. His name was John Lee, and he had the biggest smile with the most beautiful teeth. And I turned to my wife, Julie. I was like, I love this guy. Like his energy, enthusiasm. We uncover the fact that he has 3 jobs. he's the youngest of 11 people. He came over from Haiti 5 years ago. And as we get to know each other, it's a long dinner. I tell my wife, Julie, I'm like, I'm going to go there. Are you ready? And she's like, yeah, Chris, just go there. And I go, all right, John Lee, what is your dream? This is my favorite question, and I want you to be honest. He calls me Mr. Chris. He goes, Mr. Chris, I have 2 dreams. One is to get back to Haiti. My mom's sick. I've got 10 siblings there, and I just want to get back. That's why I'm working so hard, is to save up for a plane ticket. And Mr. Chris, my second dream is to come to America and work in hospitality. And he goes to get our dessert. I turn to Julie. I'm like, all right, I'm going to Aladdin this thing, because we're going to make that first dream come true. And it's so cool. Full circle. He is in Haiti right now. We bought his plane ticket. And after I posted this blog post, Candace Nelson, who started Sprinkles Cupcake, commented. He was like, Chris, I've got John Lee. We'll take care of his visa. He can come work for me and my new startup out in LA. I'm like, look at this, right? Like, how exciting is that? And like, so when we do this, right, we don't just do it for the intention of reciprocity or getting something out of it. We've got to live it and breathe it. So
yeah. No, that is such a great story. I'm envious. Like, okay, I gotta have my John Lee moment.
Yeah.
But, as you're talking about having these conversations, my kids call it franking people, because I'll have just inane conversations with anybody. And they'll say, hey, Dad, I franked somebody.
I love it.
Which means they just got into small talk,
I love it.
I'm going to find out where this guy went to high school. Watch.
Yeah.
But how your name came up with Vince Puglisi, I shared with him that when I was, I used to be an attorney. I was working downtown, tax consultant, not really, it was a good job, but it really wasn't. I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm like,
sure.
It's soul sucking.
Yeah.
I parked in a parking garage where I had to leave my keys. So I figured, you know what, I'm just going to get to know my parking lot attendants.
I love it.
And I didn't tell Vince the story, but I just quick little conversations. How you doing today? Well, I came in one day and one of the guys said to me, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Well, nothing. Would you be the best man at my wedding? And I literally did it. So maybe that's my John Lee.
I love it. But, so many of us get stuck in the small talk, right? Like, I call it a race to the middle. A race to the middle is how fast can you find that common passion point with you and the other person. But a lot of times we get stuck in that. And the best way to get out of it tactically is start talking about asking those questions that are so important to each one of us. And it might seem too cheesy. I've got friends of mine that are like, Chris, that's way too cheesy. I say, okay, just ask them what fires them up, right? Once we get into those places, that's where the magic begins to really unravel and where bonds are made, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, we feel like we can't go there.
Well, continuing on with that story, and this guy, he and his wife, we're still friends through the wonder of Facebook. Thank you for all your work with Facebook. But there was a woman there. Her name was Twyla, and she kept the keys. And I would talk to her every day because she took the keys and put them on this big board, so she knew where your cars were, and she could move them around and things like that. And I tell people that here's a secret: women love to talk about their kids. That lights them up, right? And they really like to talk about their grandkids. So every day, Twyla, how's your daughter? How's your granddaughter? Every day. And there's hundreds of attorney types coming and going. One day she stopped me and she said, how would you like to be an extra in a movie? They're shooting.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I know where this is going.
They're shooting a movie up in Upper Sandusky, which is north of Columbus, and they need attorneys to be in a scene. Long story short, I went up to the casting, got cast as a prisoner in what became the Shawshank Redemption, and spent a day on set in the opening prison yard scene. And that's what I told Vince. And he said, oh my God, you have got to meet Chris, because he talks about Shawshanking. So I want your version of Shawshanking would be great to hear.
Well, first of all, it's a great film. And it's funny because I'll speak to audiences and I'll ask for a raise of hands who's seen it. And as you get younger, a lot of people haven't seen it. I'm like, well, you have to watch it. It's one of the greatest films ever made.
I used to bring a DVD when I spoke, and if somebody didn't see it, I'd give it away. It would be like one person. Seriously?
I love it. So it was 2012. I just inked the largest deal of my life. It was like a $30 million contract on behalf of my agency with this tech guy who I met in the early days of Facebook, 2006, 2007. There was a group of us that had a closed group, and we'd all go to each other as we kind of built this infrastructure and stuff, right? And I turned to him at this dinner after signing that contract obsessed with how to become a better sales and networker myself. And I was astonished because I said, Jason, his name's Jason Beckerman. I said, here we are 7 years later. And how did you do it? Like, I'm impossible to sell to and track down. Like, how did you do it? I'm just curious. He goes, you really want to know, Chris? I go, yeah. He goes, I Shawshanked you. I was like, Shawshank, what is that? He said, every single week for the last 7 years, I have had a touch point with you. It's been on Instagram message. It's been on Facebook message. It's been on text. It's been on email. Not once have I gone in for an ask. And here we are to where when you put this out to bid, you thought of me. And I said, Jason, that is the most amazing. I'm going to make that a verb. And I'm going to tell everyone in my agency, and I'm going to start implementing this because I'm now head of sales for the agency. And I had just gotten a call from the CMO of a Fortune 50 company who wanted to hire me for the social media gig. And I was super obnoxious on LinkedIn. I was like, you can hire me as your agency partner. I'm like, okay, I got to find her cell phone and I'm going to go Shawshank them because I got to actually provide something without asking for anything in return, right? Like this idea of Shawshanking. And by the way, Shawshanking goes back to when Andy Dufresne was in Shawshank prison. He wrote a letter a week in order to get the library funded. Right. And it wasn't until 2 years later so that's kind of where it comes from. I also like to think about it. It's like chipping away at relationships too, but it literally, that's where it came from, was the writing it's
building relationships.
Exactly.
Every non-for-profit, every college and university out there that asks for money needs to understand that.
Yes.
Because I get a call once a year from where I went to college, and it's like, hey, we just wanted to let you know what's going on. No, you're not. You're here to ask me for money.
Yep.
Once a year.
Yep. Exactly. And so, so I implemented it. I went down, I called her, and I said, listen, let me help you just hire the next person. I've got a great network. So many people are full of nonsense when they try to sell themselves. You might end up hiring the wrong person. I'll come down and just help you. And I went down, I met, it was her and the head of marketing for this company. And, fast forward a year later, we were really good friends, right? They asked me to do a speech to their 1,000 of their employees, and I did it for free, right? And it was 14 months later from the day that I got my first contract with this company. And today, we have 120 employees on that one account. It totally changed the game, all because I saved my asks and I practiced this genuine connection through Shawshanking. And so, a lot of people would be like, well, what's the best way to save your asks? It's by Shawshanking, right? It's by chipping away through time and going in with providing value. I say, and everyone lives somewhere on that ask continuum, right? With asks come, and we all have these people in our network, right? With the guys or gals that come in for 3 asks in a row. And it might be as simple as, hey, I need tickets to the Ohio State game. And then they're like, hey, can you introduce, asks come really easy to those people, which most likely that makes them an asshole, right? The other side of that spectrum is actually, I'm a recovered asshole that went way too far to the other side, where I would let the ask pass me by. And I've got one of my favorite tactics for those people that let the ask pass them by. We got to move closer to the center, meaning that you might find that perfect moment to go in and say, I'd love to do some work for you. And you don't do it because you're so obsessed with cultivating the relationship and you feel almost bad. People pleasers tend to let the ask pass them by. And so my favorite tactic for that is actually what I learned in the early days of Facebook. When Sheryl Sandberg first got there, she did a training with their sales staff. And it was as simple as turn your let's into and answer it with a buy when. So anytime you say, let's do this, let's do that, you answer it with a buy when. And it was implemented to me as I said, let's move 5 million of our dollars to Facebook for our auto client. And the guy from Facebook goes, buy when? And I was kind of taken aback. And I'm like, fourth quarter. And sure enough, it actually happened. We do this all the time in networking. Let's grab coffee. Or let's do dinner when you're in town. And that might be an empty ask, meaning like, I don't have any intention to grab coffee or do dinner with you, right? I'm just doing it because I want you to like me. And that's an empty ask. But if you actually in those moments say, okay, buy when, and you take out your calendar, all of a sudden it's happening. You're like, wow, this actually happened, right? So there's a lot of things that I'm trying to inspire around while also getting a lot more fulfillment along the way, right? Because it takes us out of this one-track mind of reciprocity in our business, and it opens up to us as humans with our head and hearts.
I want to reflect back on Wayne Baker's book, Dr. Wayne Baker. He has a little segment in there. It's actually a study. I don't know if you're familiar. I don't want to put you on the spot, but they did a study on how to ask. And what they determined, there are two basic types of asks. There's a dependent ask, give me a fish. And then there's the autonomous ask, which is teach me to fish. And what the study determined was that the people lean into the autonomous ask. Yeah, I would love to teach you to fish because I know you're never going to have to come back to me again and get a fish every day.
Right.
I don't know if you talk with groups about that or deal with those sorts of things.
So I go to a place of this, which is how I did. So I interviewed the world's untouchables, the founder of Carlyle Group. And people were like, Chris, how did you get with these people? I was like, it all started with one person. Yeah. And I would end every single one of my interviews with this tactic that is a chapter in Save Your Asks. And it's called masking your ask in your dream. And as long as you're being genuine to what that dream is, it will 99% of the time, people will go out of their way to open up a door for you. And so I would actually tell, and in this case, it was a guy by the name of Jason Trotwine, and he sold his veterinary clinics for $2.8 billion. He's 45 years old, and he stays under the radar. He doesn't do any interviews, right? And I said, Jason, I'm going to practice that with you. Are you ready? He was like, sure, buddy. And we had like an awesome connection as we were Zooming from Hawaii, like just a great guy. And I said, all right, it is my dream to create a handbook to help people better network and sell by saving their asks and also make it a lot more fulfilling along the way. Who in your network do I have to talk to? And he goes, Chris, I've got your guy. And it's going to seem a little weird, but bear with me. So I was one of the first guys to go to Kelly Slater's surf ranch, and it's like $10,000 a wave. So if you botch the wave, you only get like 6 waves when you're there. And there's this guy, Raymana, who I will tell you, Chris, is the greatest connector of billionaires and famous people in the world. And he's this 55-year-old Tahitian dude that can get anyone up on the wave. And it was 6 minutes into our relationship that he was about to tow me into a wave at Kelly Slater's surf ranch. He was right next to me, and he turns back. He looks into my eyes. He puts his hand on my heart, and he goes, I love you, brother. Now just breathe, just breathe. He said, now here we are 8 years later. I caught the most epic wave of my life, and we are inseparable. I text him almost every single day, talk to him. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I know of Raymana through the surfing world. I mean, he's always right next to Kelly Slater at the surfing championships, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, 24 hours later, Raymana calls me, and we end up Zooming about this connection he has with Jason. And I was asking him, I was like, what about that moment? He's like, now, Chris, don't tell Jason this, but I tell everyone that when they're next to me. I'm like, I love it. He goes, but I mean 2 things by it, Chris. 2 things. One, I want you to take in this wave. This is going to be the most epic wave of your life. And 2, this might be the most epic wave of your life you don't catch. And you're going to be pretty bummed. So I just want you to go away with a smile on your face. I was like, dude, Raymana, I love it. Right. And, you know, what just kind of pulling it full circle, right? It was 3 weeks later. I was in the middle of the Outer Banks kiteboarding of North Carolina, in the middle of it. And I was telling my buddies about this guy I'd interviewed for my book. And I heard him on someone's cell phone at the table next to us. I was like, guys, I think that's Raymana, the guy I was just telling you about. They're like, no way. And I yell over to this guy. It was in the middle of the pandemic. We were socially distanced. A guy probably in his younger 60s with Patagonia board shorts, like epic tan, right? I go, is that Raymana? And he pulls his phone up and he goes, yeah, how do you know Raymana? And Raymana via FaceTime, he goes, Chris, how do you know Charlie? I was like, Raymana, you're in Tahiti right now, and you're introducing me to Charlie. Nice to meet you, Charlie. I was just, by the way, you're the first story of my book. And I use that, right? Masking your asking your dream. Like, it opens up this whole world of opportunity for you. But I also use Raymana as one of the best examples of we all in our sales and networking need to be a little bit more Raymana and less like the assholes that we've all been brought up to be, right?
Well, I think that I guess the way I summarize this conversation is just be genuine, do things for other people, share what your hopes and desires are, and just trust in the fact that people want to help us.
Yeah.
Especially if we're good people.
Totally.
And they may need some clarification, but they'll want to help us if we've at some point along the way. And pretty cool. Two things I want to do before we wrap it up. First thing, I want you to talk about the single most effective thing somebody can do now. And then I want you to just kind of share a little bit about how the audience could help you. That would be great. Those two things. So
in my speech, I was just at Harvard 2 weeks ago with all these executives, and like I get a whole variety of audiences, and it's always super awkward when I have them take out your cell phone right now. And I want you to either right now send a text, but even more effectively, sometimes I'll do these outside, right? These speeches outside. I say, go find a place that you're comfortable. And I want you to send a video text message to someone that you haven't thanked in over a year. Someone that's had some sort of impression. It could be something small, could be something big, but send a video text message to them. And if you're sitting here in an auditorium, I say, just text someone that you haven't talked to in 6 months. It can't be friends or family, like someone that you've kind of fallen out of touch with, and just thank them and say you were thinking about them, or just say you're thinking about them, right? Like just something positive. And people are like, okay, that's kind of weird, right? But all of a sudden at the end of my speech, it's usually about 21 minutes later that I say, okay, out of everyone out there, who's heard back from that person you reached out to? And it's always 25% of the audience will raise their hand. I'm like, how awesome is that? I guarantee you, when I have 1,000 people in there, millions of dollars will be created out of that one text in new business, because for the first time ever, you didn't do that for the sake of reciprocity. And for those that don't have their hands raised, you might be an asshole, and that's why you haven't heard back from that person. But so video text messages, it is this, there's BombBomb, there's all these softwares, but you
could do it on LinkedIn.
Totally. And you just it's as simple as doing a 10-second. And I've now practiced what I've preached, right? I talked to a lot of audiences, and, whether it be the speech that I'm doing at Delta Airlines next week, or the one after that with another executive that I sat next to on a plane randomly, all of that has been cultivated via video text messages, because it brings a whole new level of that connection to the person versus just typing it out. So everyone listening, I want you to send a video text message, your first one, maybe you're already doing this, to someone that you've fallen out of touch with. And it might be thanking them for having some sort of impression on your life, or just might be someone you've fallen out of touch with, and just see what happens. And then how anyone listening can help me. I'm here to change the world, right? Like, I'm not trying to get famous or make a bunch of money. Like, I truly do want to change the world. And I want to bring more of that connection out there, because I feel like we've lost that. And so connect with me either on LinkedIn, Christopher Tuff, or on Instagram at Tuff22. And my website is christuff.me if you want to kind of learn a little bit more. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I answer every single question that comes my way, and just help me spread the word on this thing, because I feel like for the first time ever, this is what I was born to do.
That's awesome. That is awesome. The book is Save Your Asks. Get a copy. It's a great book. Chris, I'm going to take you up on your challenge. As soon as we're done, when this thing's cycling up, recording online, I have somebody in mind that I need to reach out to and just let them know I'm thinking of them. And somebody who, and I will leave their name out of it, but I will. And I'll email you and let you know the details. Yeah. So,
please.
But thank you very much for making the time. I know you're really busy, but this has been great. Hope to get you back on at some point.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.